Egypt and Qatar are stepping up efforts to salvage the Gaza ceasefire deal. Mediators are urging Israel and Hamas to commit to the agreement, with reports a high-level Hamas delegation is in Cairo. Israel's prime minister has threatened to resume the war if Hamas does not release more captives on Saturday. We can now speak to HA Hellyer, who's a senior fellow at the Royal United Services Institute and a specialist in security studies in the Middle East, joining us from Cairo. Welcome back to Al Jazeera. Are you optimistic that Israel and Hamas can reach a compromise before Saturday on this weekend's supposed to be scheduled round of exchange between the Israeli captives and the Palestinian prisoners?
Thank you very much for having me on the program. So the ceasefire outline, which, by the way, is what the Netanyahu government instructed the cabinet to refer to this as. It's an outline, it's a framework, not a deal or agreement, which I think represents the amount of good faith that's gone into this, is, I think, in very serious jeopardy at present. The Israeli government has not shown a tremendous amount of commitment to this outline in the first place. The numbers of Palestinians that have been killed during the ceasefire period already have been in at least several dozen. And of course, you have the lack of an actual mandated Israeli delegation to Doha that has the mandate to actually negotiate about phase two. That still hasn't taken place. People have been sent, but they don't have the mandate to do very much. And then, of course, you have in the background Donald Trump's administration talking about, clearing out Gaza, a Riviera on the Mediterranean. All of that, quite frankly, simply strengthens the Israeli far right and those who really want Netanyahu to just go back to war.
So when you look
I'm sure that
my apologies, but when you think about this coming Saturday and what may happen, what do you think will happen?
So what I was trying to get at is that there isn't a tremendous amount of good faith in these negotiations in the first place. I think Hamas is very concerned about it breaking down because the scenario for Hamas, if this breaks down, is far worse than if it continues. So it's not because they're a good actor. It's that this doesn't work in terms of their interests. But when it comes to the Israeli side, and of course they're the ones that have the most power in this relationship, they see so many different possibilities opening up as the result of Trump's plans that he's made clear over the past couple of weeks. So it's a very dangerous time. We might see an extension of phase one. We might see more hostages being released or more prisoners being released. But I don't know how much faith we can put into the idea that phase two will take place without tremendous pressure from the Trump administration on the Israelis, which I just don't think is very likely at the present moment.
Look, speaking of Trump's plan, the Reuters news agency is reporting, citing Egyptian security sources, in fact, that the Egyptian president, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, reportedly will not travel to Washington for talks at the White House scheduled for some time this month, if that agenda includes U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to uproot Palestinians from Gaza. Is this plan setting up the U.S. and Egypt on some sort of collision course?
Well, yes and no, in the sense that neither Egypt nor Jordan will accept the Riviera plan, and they have the full backing of the Arab League in that regard. And I think, frankly, everywhere else in the world, we've seen this narrative coming about where, it's the Arabs are not in favor of the Riviera plan. Well, actually, the world isn't in favor of the Riviera plan. The UK, the EU, many of the US's own allies internationally have come out very, very strongly against the idea that you can just move Palestinians out and create some sort of Riviera on the Mediterranean there instead. So I think that it does make it clear that, DC and Cairo really just don't see eye to eye on this. Having said that, they haven't really seen eye to eye when it comes to the Gaza war and the last 15 months generally. I do think that the Egyptian president will go to DC eventually, but I think wants to have a plan and the The Jordanian king yesterday said that there are discussions that are undergoing. I think that we'll see coming out of different Arab partners together, which I think the Arab League will endorse,
Right.
a plan for reconstruction of Gaza, and then, maybe a visit to D.C.
I mean, I did want to ask you what you think Cairo will propose.
So.
Right. I did want to ask you what Cairo will propose, but also how long Egypt can hold this off for, because at the end of the day, Egypt is a huge recipient, one of the biggest recipients, in fact, of U.S. foreign aid, and Donald Trump has threatened to possibly withhold foreign aid from the two countries, Jordan and Egypt.
So there are two things here. First of all, in terms of the plan, I think it'll really go in. I have not seen any plan, but my expectation will be is that it will go into talking about reconstruction, about how to do reconstruction without having Palestinians leave, so temporary residences in Gaza. I think it'll go into that sort of detail, and possibly talk about, taking people for medical reasons, like the Jordanian king did yesterday with regards to 2,000 Palestinian children. When it comes to keeping up the pressure and the aid, so one, Trump actually walked back somewhat his threat about aid with regards to Jordan last night. When it comes to Egypt, you are right. Of course, Egypt is the second largest recipient of American aid, second to Israel. It's a far second, of course. But when it comes to that aid, most of it goes right back to the United States in terms of engaging with military contractors. So it would be really, not in the U.S. interest to actually cut that in the first place. And second, when you look at Egypt's overall GDP, we're talking a tiny amount. And it's certainly an amount that could be offset by support from the Gulf. So I don't think the aid is going to be remotely sufficient to get Egypt to say, you know what, yeah, we're going to go for this Riviera plan. I frankly don't see a scenario where either the Jordanians or the Egyptians, for purely very strategic interests, will say, yeah, sure, we'll go for the Riviera plan. I just don't see that scenario being possible.
Okay, we'll leave it there. HA Hellyer, Senior Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, speaking to us from Cairo. Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.